Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great day and have enjoyed the sessions you've participated in so far here on day one. I'm here to introduce our next speakers who are going to talk about discharge planning and how important it is to have NICU parents be involved in that process. Craig Garfield is a neonatal hospitalist with more than 25 years working with families in the NICU. After completing his pediatric training at the Massachusetts General Hospital, he was a stay-at-home dad for his then 18-month-old son for a year when he really came to understand the needs of new parents and how we could do a better job supporting parents in pediatrics in order to achieve better outcomes for children. He co-founded the NICU to Home app and is the founder and director of the Family and Child Health Innovations Program at Lurie Children's Hospital, where their motto is Children Thrive when Families Thrive. Joining Craig in this conversation about discharge planning is Cristal Grogan. Cristal has been a dedicated advocate for the NICU and special needs communities for more than 11 years, driven by her son Seth's challenging birth and extended NICU stays overseas. Her personal journey sparked a passion for helping families like hers navigate complex medical and mental health needs. She currently works at Prolacta Bioscience, continuing her advocacy and raising awareness about long-term outcomes for NICU families. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Well, thank you all for having me here today to talk about such an important and relevant topic to all NICU families. I first want to give a little disclaimer before I start. My son is still recovering from a recent surgery, and due to another family emergency, he is in the house with me. So we're just going to roll with what life throws our way, as we always do. And although I have given him all of his favorite things, which equates to a ridiculous amount of bribes in the other room, I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that there is a possibility at some point that we might have a little visitor during our session. So I want to start off by just telling a little bit about my experience as a NICU parent. As a military family, we were living in Spain when our son Seth was born at a little over 2 pounds. I delivered at a Spanish university hospital, so not only were we thrown into this new world of everything teeny tiny that we had no idea about, we were also dealing with language barriers, socialized medicine, cultural differences. I mean, the list could go on and on, but the one thing that I remember the most, which stands out the most out of all of the things, is just how completely lost I felt. Everything was a blur. I was completely overwhelmed and nothing was in my control. My son had multiple complications, which only made things even more difficult to understand. And like many families do, I remember feeling like my parenthood was just completely stripped away from me. Like I didn't feel like a mom. I mean, I couldn't take care of him. I mean, at this point, I hadn't even met him yet. And it'd been almost a week and I was still bedridden. So I was sick, he was extremely sick, and I was spiraling. And so at my lowest moment in our journey, instead of being able to learn what was going on or being able to learn about what to expect or what to look out for or what to advocate for, I remember laying in my hospital bed doing the only thing that I knew that I could do, and that was planning my son's funeral. Now, luckily, while I was on my computer, I befriended a NICU nurse in some random chat room. And neither of us can remember even how we came across each other, but she happened to also be bedside because she had just had her third preemie and was in her own unit with a 30-weeker who had been born 2 days before my son. And because of this friendship, that I made, this NICU nurse was able to help me better understand and guide me through our journey. She helped me with recommending what questions to ask and explained what was going to happen when he was diagnosed with necrotizing enterocolitis, and what to expect from the surgeries and what milestones we'd probably need to meet in order to be discharged. And I just remembered thinking, just looking around the room and just thinking, how cool to be if everyone could have this person at their fingertips. I just happened to get someone that had crazy hours. And so even being in the time zone I was able to get information and some sort of direction. And so she gave me insight. She gave me knowledge, and most of all, she gave me hope. And that hope is what gave me strength. And so I learned, and I listened, and I researched, and I absorbed everything that I could. And I was able to learn how to advocate in a way that I never knew was ever even possible. In fact, I was actually the first parent to ever hold a baby skin to skin in that particular unit. My husband was the second. And that was just, it was so empowering as a parent to feel like my voice was heard and that my child mattered and that I could do something. And I will never forget walking out of that unit on our discharge day, passing multiple families doing kangaroo care with their babies. And it was in that moment, right before I walked out of those doors, that I promised myself that, I would do anything I could to make sure that parents didn't feel the way that I felt during our NICU stay. That somehow, some way, I would educate and empower parents, just like that NICU nurse I befriended had helped me. And in that single moment, I knew that if I helped one parent or just one family, then maybe that's what I was put on this earth to do. And so it became my calling. And at the time, I didn't know what that would look like. And sometimes I still don't. Just the way that things work with a kiddo with, extra needs. And as the years have passed, my advocacy journey, has taken me on a lot of roads that have not yet been traveled, but that I have been able to pave for those who are following in my footsteps and looking for help and direction. And, over 13 years later, I have no regrets in where life has taken me. So I started working with NICU parent organizations when Seth was about 3 years old, which eventually led me to the National Perinatal Association. And not long after I joined their board of directors, I became involved in a work group with the most incredible and talented individuals. It was a multidisciplinary team, and not that I'm surprised, but I am always in awe and honored to even see how many of you that were in that work group are in the chat of this very session going on right now. And so together we kind of set forth on what sometimes seemed like this impossible, daunting task of developing guidelines and recommendations for NICU discharge preparation and transition from the NICU to home. And we wanted parents to be at the core of these guidelines, to be educated, to know what to expect, to acknowledge their time that was valuable, and while still recognizing that the trauma that they were currently experiencing. Because discharge readiness is the desired outcome, and discharge preparation is the actual process. And I can say firsthand as a parent that was completely unprepared, that without adequate education and preparation, one of the outcomes that often happens is there's an increased risk of readmission. And this can happen for a number of reasons. Parents may not know how or when to seek medical attention appropriately, or how to administer medications, or they may not be comfortable, with dosing, and they may not seek out therapies that their child needs, or even know that their child needs specialty follow-up care or therapy in general. I know for me personally, when Seth was discharged, we were basically handed a baby and given a pat on the back. And although I did have that moment when leaving the NICU where I know there was something bigger than me happening, and I felt like I was making a difference, I remember being just as equally terrified as we stepped out of the main sliding doors of that hospital. And that's what the picture on the right is. I literally had him in a sling because they didn't do car seat tests in Spain. And I remember turning to my husband, and we just stood there and looked at each other, and we're like, I remember saying, I can't believe they just let us walk out of this hospital with a baby. Like, I don't even know how to, like, we don't even know how to put him in a car seat. And I remember walking down to the parking garage, and we were so confused because he was so small and he didn't fit inside of the car seat. And so we didn't really know what to do. And so, how, you drive home 20 miles an hour from the hospital anyway. Like, it was the longest drive home, I think, that we ever had. Um, and, you know, all we knew is that we had a very sick baby, and we were going to have to figure it out somehow. Um, I was exhausted. I was desperate, terrified that I'd make the wrong decisions for him, or that I wasn't doing something right, or I wasn't doing enough in general. I had no idea what to do next. There was no type of plan in place. And it wasn't even until my son was well into his school years that I realized that, oh, we should have followed up with a neurologist or a GI or other specialists. And my son has cerebral palsy. He has autism. He has epilepsy. He had surgical neck and sepsis while in the NICU. And, these serious medical, complex medical needs that you would have thought at one point or another, we would have been referred to the correct specialists. But, it's easy. It's so easy to fall through the cracks when there's a lack of communication between members of the child's care team, and that includes parents. And at first I thought it was just because, we were born in a foreign country and we had our transition, and I thought that, even at the worst of it, that someone out there had to have the worst experience ever, and maybe that's just the cards we were dealt as a family. But after moving back to the States, I quickly realized that, this was happening everywhere. Like, all these parents felt like they were just put out to sea on a raft. And so that was one of the reasons why I jumped so quickly at the chance to join the discharge planning work group with NPA, because I saw families struggling. I saw mental health concerns growing, and I saw the gaps in systems that were failing these children that they were serving. And, you know, and all of this I saw firsthand, because that was me. I was one of them. And I thought, there has to be a better way. There have to be guidelines set in place that will help families successfully transition from NICU to home. And because as a parent, being discharged from the hospital, that should be a time of it should be a time of celebration, and a time for connection, and a time for peace of mind, and just to just be. And so I knew these guidelines would help ensure that discharge planning occurred in a timely, organized, and consistent manner, so families can leave the NICU feeling empowered and knowledgeable and confident. And to finally see these guidelines published, and people taking action, not just talking about it, but taking real tangible action, has been one of the most wonderful and rewarding experiences that I've had. And I love seeing how much has changed since my son's NICU stay, because resources were so slim back then. For me, I would go to the NICU, I would take pictures of Seth, I would take pictures of his medical charts, his medications. I'd write down any questions I had or anything that I saw that didn't seem normal or seem notable in any kind of way. Drive 45 minutes back home, translate everything back into English, because remember, everything's in Spanish. So translate everything into English, try to figure out what was going on with him. Looking at notes and what medications they were giving him, write down in my notebook even more questions, and hope to make it back to the NICU to speak with the only English speaking neonatologist that would work with us to ask any questions that I had. And that was just, if I happen to remember to bring my notebook and not leave it on the counter at home. Because let's be real, the brain fog is a very real thing. And I just became so exhausted at that point, and we were in a different time zone from family and friends, that I knew that I needed to get creative, in some form or fashion. So I used Shutterfly, and to just blog about everything that happened that day, and upload pictures of Seth that day and then be done with it. And that way, everyone knew what was going on. I didn't have to call 10 million people at the same time, or one after another. And so that's how I communicated everything. And I did that for the entire stay. And I kept finding myself needing to go back through my blogs to figure out what dates things happened on. And so at the end of his NICU stay, I compiled all of my daily pictures and daily blogs and turned them into a book. Um, and so for the next couple of years, I carried around this book to my appointments, and especially if I needed to fill out that stack of dreaded, like, what is your baby's medical history forms? Because I knew this book had every date the surgeries were on. I knew exact times he was diagnosed with something new, or he was septic, or what medications he was taking. It became my holy grail because nothing else existed. So to see the progress in family-centered care and to see parent organizations growing and flourish. I mean, I think of the conference today, and I could have only dreamed of having an organization like Hand to Hold being literally by my side while I was in the NICU to help guide me. And and now I see how, NICU discharge planning is being integrated, not just at discharge, but, really trying to build it in from day one when a family is admitted. And that's a monumental step in the right direction. And for parents to have resources at their fingertips, things like the, NICU parent networks, NICU Bill of Rights, um, and Hand to Hold's navigating the NICU and beyond, their parent guide, which is phenomenal. If you guys have not gotten your hands on it yet, I pretty sure they'll tell you where to get it, or it might be on the app. But it took everything that I did. I'll help you in a minute. Um, sorry, as expected. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. Yes, please stay in the kitchen. Thank you. But all of these resources that are at fingertips now that just weren't there before, that you can pick up now, a book and journal in it and not have to come up with your own, ways to do something. It's just incredible. And then, the state-of-the-art technology that Dr. Garfield's going to talk about next. I am just so grateful that I get to be a part of it and to be able to witness families starting to leave the NICU feeling empowered and knowledgeable, and to see a parent smiling and confident in the care that they can give their child. It just makes every tear I have ever cried in frustration along the way just 100% worth it. So let's continue to give these families a pathway that sets them up for success. We have solutions. We know how to do better. So let's do better, because the future of the world's most fragile families depend on us. And with that, I would love to turn this over to Dr. Garfield and have him show you what the future holds for families like mine. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Crystal. And come on, it wouldn't be a NICU conference if there weren't some children around, right? So I'm glad that we got to hear a little bit about that too. Um, my name is Craig Garfield. I am a neonatal I've been doing this for over 25 years, and I think a lot of the things that Crystal mentioned really are what motivated me as a physician and as a researcher to start to think about how we can do a better job, how we can support families better. I'm going to share my slides and get the. There we go. And I think that is a lot of us who are attending this conference today go about our days thinking, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do these things. And I was lucky enough to be in a position to really, as the first smartphones were being rolled out, think about these families who are sitting at the bedside with these new phones that not only can play Tetris, but also can make phone calls and download information. And how could we use that to help families and to support them during the NICU stay? Our goal really has always been to start discharge at admission. And as someone who works in the NICU, um, that goal still eludes us. We think about it, but there's always babies that kind of sneak on through and families that sneak through, and we haven't done a good job of preparing them for discharge. And part of that is because of the busy NICUs that we all work in. The NICU that I work in Chicago has about 12,000 deliveries. It's an 85-bed NICU. So it's one of the bigger ones with a lot of deliveries. And we get busy doing all sorts of other things. And so there's got to be a way to harness technology so that we can start to think about how do we support families from admission all the way through to discharge? And how do we address those key things that Crystal brought up of feeling that loss of control, of being in a situation where you don't even understand the language. That language may still be English, and you still don't understand the language of what's being said inside the NICU. And we really wanted to meet parents where they were, instead of giving them a stack of papers that then get kind of pushed into the corner. And next thing you know, you're checking out after a 2 or 3 month stay. And they're the papers that we gave you on the first day that you never looked at again. So how could we do a better job of doing that? So we know that with the current challenges in NICUs, that we're constantly being asked to cut the costs, but we also are being told to improve the outcomes. Those things don't necessarily line up. So we need to find a new way to start thinking about supporting families and how to improve the workflow for all the work that we do. I've never met someone who's on staff in a NICU who doesn't want to do the best thing by their patients, and by their families, but comes down to how do we support people to do the best work they can to support families in the best ways that they can. So we know that parental education often is concentrated in the last 48 to 72 hours before discharge. That's stressful for families for sure, because we're trying to like cram for the biggest test of your life, taking your baby home. And it's stressful for the care team to suddenly have to be like, oh gosh, did we talk about how to prepare the formula? Do we talk about how to make the home safe and how to care for this fragile baby? And we all have had experiences where the parents say, I would like to please take home the Philips monitor, and I would like to take home this nurse also. Is that possible? And it's not. So we have to be smart about how we do the next best thing. We also know from research that parents forget or misremember 80% of the care instructions that we give them. And part of that is because it is stressful and we're cramming for the exam. And we all know, at least my experience in cramming for exams, is you don't retain much of that information. So with all that we're trying to teach them kind of goes over their head at the end of the day, and then they're going home not prepared for discharge. We also recognize that 15 to 37% of NICU infants require readmission within 1 year. So this is not only expensive for the healthcare system, but it's extremely stressful for the family and for the baby as well. So what all this adds up to really is increased expenses and suboptimal outcomes. And really, we haven't changed much in what we've done in terms of our discharge planning, short of the guidelines that Cristal talked about and helped develop, and creation of organizations like Hand to Hold. These are wonderful ways to support families, but we still can do a better job of doing this. So at the same time that we're trying to focus on improved outcomes, there's been this huge uptick in smartphone use. And depending on the folks that are on the call, I'm sure there's a variety of different ages on this webinar. But you can see what this great increase in smartphone use has been, and where we actually can take advantage of it, because in our population of people having babies are on the left-hand side of this slide. And that's the group that's really using smartphones all the time. On average, people spend 3 hours and 15 minutes per day on their phone. And individuals check their phones on average 58 times per day. So it just makes sense that we should be thinking about using that as a modality to reach and support families, so that we reach them where they are. And we're not trying to teach them things while they're sitting in the unit, while the alarms are going off, new admissions are coming in, and we're trying to teach them about how to take care of their most valuable asset of all. But maybe there's information we can send them that they can read at home at their own leisure. So we created NICU to Home. We created it about 12 years ago. It really is the first evidence-based NICU navigation and discharge coordination solution. We started with a small grant and focusing just on very low birth weight infants, and then have expanded that to now offer it for all babies in the NICU as well. And that was after looking around and seeing there really weren't good solutions. There might be a couple of apps that maybe were more general or generic in the information that they offered. There might be a hospital that offered a particular app for their particular unit, but there wasn't really a good solution that harnessed all the powerful technology that we have at our fingertips to really support families in the way that we know that we can. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure was that it was personalized. We wanted to make sure it integrated with the EMR. We wanted to make sure that it didn't add more work to nurses and bedside staff, and that it wasn't overwhelming to parents. So we did a lot of interviews with parents. We asked them how they thought about how an app like this might work, what information was the right amount of information. It very much was a Goldilocks problem of, like, we wanted to give them not too much information and not too little, but just the right amount to make sure that they felt supported throughout their NICU journey. So I will start by just showing a short video of the different features, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the research that went into it, and then talk more broadly about some of the feedback that we've gotten on this sort of technology. And you should be able to hear
NICU to
this.
Home is the first evidence-based NICU navigation and discharge coordination solution. NICU to Home streamlines the care team's workflow, allowing clinicians to dedicate more time to patient care while improving communication with families. With transparent information sharing, NICU to Home empowers families to confidently care for their babies both during the NICU stay and after discharge. Let's explore some of the platform's interactive features. Here's an overview of NICU to Home's key features. Secure messaging with text, photo, and video engages families, improves communication, and streamlines clinician workflow, while automated notifications keep parents updated with real-time updates on education, parent tasks, reminders, and more from the home screen. Daily EHR updates use clear graphs and definitions, giving parents an easy view of their baby's progress and recent trends. The Education Center offers over 800 resources to help parents understand their baby's condition. The Discharge Roadmap visually shows parents their baby's progress in the discharge process. NICU to Home revolutionizes NICU care, empowering families with seamless support and guidance. Our goal is to build trusted relationships that lead to the expansion of family engagement solutions that create the NICU of the future. Angel Eye Health, let us show you the difference.
So just before I go through this slide, I should say that after 12 years of doing this research and kind of building the evidence that supports our findings, Angel Eye Health, which you may know them from their camera solutions or from their milk tracker feeding solutions, acquired us last year and now has been working to kind of scale this up. I think we're really good at the research and the clinical care of babies in the NICU, but being able to scale this up so that it's available to NICU and to families across the country was something that we needed some help with, and that's where Angel Eye came in. So that's how they came in at the end of that video there. But I think if you even just think about any one of those features, whether it's two-way text messaging, whether it's connecting with the EMR so that you get a daily update, any of those things, as a parent who's gone through the NICU, you would think, God, I wish I had that in my hands when I was in the NICU. So much we do is really antiquated, right? So we're asking parents to please call in the morning to get an update on your baby of how things were overnight. And what we found in 10 years of research is that parents actually are happy to get an update on their phone when they first wake up in the morning and then be able to kind of go about their day. They will call and check in at the NICU, of course, that's where their baby is, and they come to really trust the care that we're providing. But it makes it a lot easier for the parents to start their day. And it also makes it easier for the staff because now they're not stopping what they're doing, washing their hands, picking up the phone to talk to a parent to give them an update. That all is much easier just delivered through using the technology. And so what we did in the very first study, and I'll tell you about three studies that we've done for NICU to home. The first one was on very low birth weight infants, so those 1,500 grams or lower. And we got them right as they transitioned from the open crib from the isolette into the open crib. So really getting ready for discharge where it's getting to be like, this is really going to happen for parents, which oddly enough is often the time when in the NICU where we're used to dealing with small, very, very sick babies, these babies, the feeders and growers tend to kind of like slip out and we kind of lose track of them because there's nothing urgently necessary for them. And so I think it's a time when parent stress is increasing and our engagement often might be decreasing with them. And the key measure that we included in all of our studies is parenting sense of competence. So how comfortable do parents feel taking care of their baby? And what we found in this randomized controlled trial, where half of the families got the app and the other half just had usual care, is that parents who got the app had much higher levels of parenting sense of competence. So this solid line here down on the bottom is the control group, and you can see it's the lowest one. It also kind of drops. The midpoint is the day before discharge, and then that's 2 weeks after discharge on the far right. And you see this dose-dependent improvement. So the more families use the app, the higher their sense of confidence was in taking care of the baby, which is exactly what you're looking for something that's going to be beneficial to families. We also found from their reports that they were more prepared for discharge, the group that got the app compared to the group that didn't, and that there was a drop in the length of stay by 1 day in the group that used the app the most. So you're actually seeing improvements then and actually probably reduced costs on the hospital side and parents getting home earlier. What we heard from the families at the end of this study was, why am I getting this at admission? Why am I getting, or discharge? Why am I getting this when I'm going from an isolette into an open crib? We should be giving this to families at the very beginning, and all families should get it, not just those that are the very low birth weight infants. So we went back to the drawing board, and that required us to really think about it in a very dynamic way. How will you take care of all babies in the NICU from admission through discharge with all the variety that they might have? That might be 2 days, it might be 2, 3, 4 months. And so we did that with the same outcomes of increased parenting sense of confidence in those families when you compared the group that got the app to those that were in the control group. And then that led us to say, okay, well, this is at our big, academic center in the middle of the city. What if we did this out in the community? What if we did this in level 3 NICUs that have a much more diverse population than we have at the mothership? So we did it in 3 additional NICUs in the Chicago area. And in those NICUs, really interestingly, we were hoping that we might actually find some health equity improvements here. And we did. We found that among African American families who had the app compared to those that didn't, their social support measures increased. And this is a population that traditionally has been marginalized in the healthcare system, may not trust, and there's a lot of bias that they experience in the healthcare system. And so we hypothesized that the reason why this social support increases in the families that had the app is that we're telling them, who your care providers are. And it's very hard to keep track of all the people that are in your room taking care of your baby. But we're telling them who they are that day in real time. We're including them in all the information that we're sharing amongst ourselves in terms of our rounding and things like that, weight gain, respiratory status, feeding status, and things like that. And we're also giving them information we want them to know and checking with them about how that's going. So we're really excited to see that improvement in that particular population that may help address some of the disparities in health that we see in families in the NICU. So when you actually talk to parents about kind of what the benefits they felt of using the NICU to home app were, 77% in this sample were more confident in caring for their baby. 79% were less anxious on a day-to-day basis. 90% of families said that they understood their baby's progress better, and 70% made fewer calls to the NICU. Again, this app is not helping with diagnosis or determining what path of care you should be on, but it's about supporting parents so they can be more engaged in what's happening with their baby. And what we heard again and again from nurses at the bedside is families came in actually with better questions and better understanding what's going on, which I think is a huge benefit. And finally, 76% reported spending less time on the internet. That's just good for everybody, right? We don't need families Googling things that have nothing to do and no basis for their particular baby, and then they come in and are worried about that sort of thing. So we can educate them as they're going along in their NICU stay. We had really outstanding engagement with this and really some great feedback from our nurses too. So parents actually tapped into the app 20 to 25 times per day, which is a really good engagement. And if you remember at the beginning of this, I talked about how much parents are on their phones, families are on their phones to begin with. This is a really good engagement. And we got great feedback from parents that this is something that's helpful and has good user interfaces and easy to navigate. 92% of the nurses felt that the NICU to home helped parents better understand their baby's stay in the NICU. 95% believed daily update was useful in keeping parents aware of baby's progress. And then 80% experienced improved communication between staff and family. And just one example of that is like on day of life 2, of family would come in, we would have already started the bilirubin lights on the baby because the bilirubin was high, and the nurse was going to kind of talk with them about the fact that we had just started the billy lights, and don't worry, this is kind of normal. And she started to explain that, and the parent said, "Yeah, I read about it in the app last night. I'm not that's fine, great, thanks for telling us." And that just shifts everything. The same thing has happened with head ultrasounds, which typically are done around day of life 7. If we send out the information on day of life 6, parents are able to read it at home when things are much more calm, and then they're actually able to engage in a better conversation with the bedside team. So just hearing from some parents who had used the app, one mother of a 33-weeker said the daily update, especially the weight milestones, were highlights we anticipated every morning. It helped me gauge progress without feeling like I was bugging the nurses. And I would say most parents I talked to ended the day by looking at the app and started the day by looking at the app too, as a way of just kind of feeling connected back with their baby. Another mother of a 32-weeker said, "I like being able to check in on my baby's progress without having to make a phone call to the NICU nurse." One of the fathers in the study said, "There's a sense of relief to know who's caring for my child at all times and his daily activities." And finally, this parent said, "Any doubt or concerns you have, you can always look in the NICU at Home app and find information about what's concerning you." And then when we actually talked to the bedside team and the providers from the hospital team in the NICU, this nurse practitioner said, now with the NICU to Home app, parents can get more and consistent information. I think that's very important and really touches on also what Cristal was mentioning around being consistent in what the information that we're providing and what those guidelines do to help provide that. So that you're not getting different information from different people, particularly as I know in our NICU, we often have different new staff members coming on, and they may not be giving the same information to some of the other people that are there. This one NICU nurse said the app provides more specific, simple information from beginning of the journey, including gestational milestones. And then the constant updates the parents receive and wealth of trustworthy information available to parents was one of the huge benefits for those families getting the app. And finally, the neonatologist said, "This is a method of communication that our young parents are most familiar with. we have to embrace that parents will go to phones first to look up information, and the NICU to Home app is a way to steer parents toward the most accurate information and content as it relates to their infant. And that in the end can probably save us all time. So just to summarize, we know that parents need support in the NICU from admission through discharge. And I think that's what all of this really focuses on and is going to ultimately lead us to better outcomes if we prepare parents better. Technology can help support parents, and this is just an example of the type of technology that can be used and can be scaled up to different NICUs, and can be offered to all parents wherever they are, whether they're able to be at the bedside or not. Clearly, parents are ready. They are ready to accept this. This is how they do their banking and shopping and things like that. And the real question is, are the rest of us ready to engage in this and how we can best support them? So I'll turn it back over to Crystal, and I'll stop sharing the slides here. Happy to answer any questions you all might have as we go on.
All right, it looks like they're going to keep you busy. So there are a lot of questions. Everyone is excited. Everyone is just blown away, just like I am. I mean, it's an incredible system. One of the first questions was, does this link with the Epic chart system?
Yeah, it actually is agnostic to EMR. So whatever EMR you have, we can integrate with. The government has required all hospital systems to have kind of a generic connector ability. So we have about 45, maybe 50 different clinical pieces that get pulled from the EMR. So no one is doing any extra charting, right? I would be thrown out of my NICU if I made our nurses or asked our nurses to do more charting. So basically, they chart as they're going to chart. We're just using the benefits and the smartness of technology to then extract that information and send it, whether it's Epic or Cerner, in an app in an easily digestible format to parents to understand it. And I kind of mentioned it before, but we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's the right amount of information to give them. And we had some parents who were like, I want everything. I want every heartbeat and every breath on there. Basically, I want the Philips monitor on my phone. That's not good for families, right? First of all, it's not clinically significant, but second of all, you also need to be able to take breaks. So what we decided on was a daily update is a kind of a compilation of the last 24 hours of these key metrics that we basically are going over in rounds and talking with parents about. We don't send out information like what the latest head ultrasound result is. That's a conversation, right? So that needs to be a conversation with your team. But things that are just kind of like what the weight gain is, what the respiratory status, stool output, feeds, bed type, those sort of things are what parents really kind of want to know, and we can quickly send that out to them. That's a great question.
That's awesome. And is this in other languages? Is it available in anything other than English?
Yeah, so that's one of the coolest things is that by thinking, so we always had it in English and Spanish, and now working with Angel Eye, this blew me away. We're able to translate it into 70 different languages. So literally, like it's hard to come up with a language that we haven't translated into. And it translates not only the content, like the words, but also all the buttons on the phone too. So we have examples of it in Japanese. We have examples in Haitian Creole. And if you have NICUs that have these different languages, this is a great resource for them. It also should mention that everything we wrote, and it's over 800 pieces of content, translated into those 70 languages, is at the 5th grade level. So when we think about health literacy, I think it's a great thing to be able to address that and then to be offer that to families too.
And does this work with, talk to text features like voiceover?
So if there's a video in English, it wouldn't translate that particular piece if that's what you mean. So we will be working on that kind of in the future. But right now it provides all of that in a text version. And then if your phone is set up to do voice, then it could do that.
Perfect. And then are trainings available to teach the clinicians trauma-informed communication when texting or messaging with families through the technology? What does that training look like for staff?
Yeah. So all that is going to probably be NICU by NICU as opposed to through the NICU to home app. But I think that trauma-informed care and kind of how do you do that messaging is really important. Also, I think we're on the tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding how best to provide that trauma-informed care to our families. One of the things that's I think is important is that you have the ability through the two-way messaging to include other people on the team. So if you're messaging with the parents, the social worker can see that through the dashboard. That's part of the NICU to home features. And you can ask parents like how we can help you better. So whether that's social work, lactation, whatever it is, the kind of support that they need, that's all included in there too. And I should probably add, again, one of the like, I mean, I love this and I think it's a great way to support families. But one of the things that happens is families are trying to figure out when they're coming in, what they're going to do. And so we get caught sometimes as the care team where we don't know when they're coming in and we're not sure what their plans are for when they come in. So one of the features of NICU to home is that we're actually able to ask every evening, are you planning to come to the NICU? And if you're planning to come, around when, and what would you like to do? So if you're bringing in fresh breast milk and you check that box, then the nurse at the bedside doesn't have to defrost breast milk and then start feeding to them when the parents are walking in with fresh. Or if you wanted to breastfeed the baby and we didn't know that, this is a way to let the team know that that's something that you want to plan to do that particular day.
Oh, perfect. Which kind of leads into another question that was on here about timing. Is this updated, like up-to-date information real time, or are there certain times during the day that it updates? How does
Yeah.
that information feed in?
So that's a great question because when we thought a lot about what should be the flow of sending this information out, we send educational content gets sent out. It's between 5 to 8 different pieces per day. There's a library that they can search for. So if they hear a term or want to learn a little bit more, if their baby say is 28 weeks, but they want to learn about what a 32-weeker does, like they can go and look through the library. But we've kind of parsed out what's the right amount of information. And what we heard from parent feedback is it's about 5 to 8 pieces of content per day. It's not too much. It's not a fire hose. Our parents actually told us that we crazily enough have a Dunkin' Donuts in our main floor of our hospital. It's just the right amount of information to read while you're waiting for your coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. So I was like, great, we hit the sweet spot there. So the educational content gets sent out over the course of the day. We actually asked parents if they wanted the information sent at night as well. And because moms are often up pumping, they did want that information sent out. So it's kind of around the clock. And then we allow the daily update to go out at 7:30 in the morning. And that became the sweet spot because we wanted to make sure 7 o'clock was the change of shift in our hospital and most hospitals. So we wanted to make sure that anything that was happening that needed to be communicated to the parents around the change of shift could be done. And then at 7:30, they would get the summary, the 24-hour summary of what's going on with their baby. Most babies are weighed around in the NICUs at like midnight. So that information would be there. But I wanted to so the one other piece around sending out that information is that it allows the family to kind of not have to do that morning call to the NICU, which I think takes up a lot of time for staff and for families as well as they're trying to get maybe other kids out the door or they're trying to get themselves out the door into to work as well.
That's amazing. And what about parents with twins or multiples? Can parents view two or more child's progress at the same time? Like, how does that work with
Yeah. Yeah. So, of course, if you have more than one baby in the NICU, you can slide back and forth just like between the two of them. You'll get dedicated information for each of those babies. And you can track that too. So, one of the things that we thought was really important, especially even thinking, Crystal, about your experiences, like keeping an eye towards discharge, right? So you're able to track the weight increases, the decreases in respiratory support, and keep track of that over time so that you're kind of, we orient it towards the main discharge requirements, which are gaining weight, off tubes and oxygen and things like that. No A's and B's. We do send like an A and B. This is maybe a good example for people listening is we'll send that an A and a B or A or B occurred, but we won't go into the details of how low it was, how long it lasted. Again, that's a conversation for the team. We're not in any way replacing the really high quality care that's happening in the NICU. It's more supporting parents in this particular journey. The last thing I just want to mention, though, about this, about information going back and forth, is by next summer, what we're hoping to be able to do now is feed back into the EMR. So right now, everything we do comes from the EMR into the app, into the parents. When parents watch a discharge video on car seat testing or CPR or whatever it is, once they've checked off that they've seen that, that will be able to feed back into the EMR and actually save the nursing staff from having to log all of that. And you'll know where they are on their discharge journey in terms of educational content. So if you have 10 pieces of educational content you want to assign to families and they've done 6 of them, you know which 4 still need to be done by them. And I think that's a real improvement in terms of where we are now, where we're just like, oh my gosh, they're going home today. Let's start going through the discharge packet.
Right. And while we're talking about education, where I love the fact that you're fed education, you can find education, as much as you want to absorb. Where does this education come from, and how often is it updated?
Yeah, so all of our education either was well, we have lots of great sources. So we have 800 pieces, so there's lots of different sources for it. Much of it has been written by the NICU to Home team using resources that are out there. We have recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics, from NAN and the NNP, all the discharge coordination that has been worked on in this group is all included in there as well. And there may be things that are missing. We're open to new ideas. And one of the things that we do when we work with a NICU is say, what's the information that you have right now? You may have a music therapy program or something like that that you want to make sure your families know about. You have an ability to customize and send that information out to your particular group too. So all of that content is available to you, and then you can supplement it with whatever customized information that you need and that you want to send out to your families.
And then can you still access the content after discharge?
Yeah, so we have content right now written until 6 months post discharge, and we're working on even continuing that further with an ultimate goal, really, of thinking about, getting to from admission through discharge is one hurdle, but then you have, once you go home, how can we help streamline that process and support families in that way too? So one of the things that we're looking at for the future, once we get this up and rolling, is how do we engage families with NICU follow-up, particularly if they're in rural areas and they're further away. Are there ways to use technology to help families in that particular way, and really keep going? Because as everyone on the call knows, like when you go home, that's just really the beginning for families, and trying to understand where your baby is, for example, developmentally, given that they've had a 3 or 4 month stay in the NICU, and how does that compare to where they are on the developmental milestones is really important. So one of the questions early on was how to get good developmental milestones, and you have to correct for the gestational age. And the app is actually able to help with that by providing that information, and also helping parents understand what that correction means and how they should always be thinking about it when they're talking to people in the healthcare system.
That's great. Let's see what else. We have the ultimate question of how do we obtain this? How do we get it? Is it outside of the research setting? Do we have to have cameras? What does it look like to, get their hands on such a great resource?
Yeah, sure. I think so. Probably the easiest thing to do would be to go, if you're working in NICU now, is to reach out to the Angel Eye Health at angelihealth.com, and click to learn more about NICU to Home. One of the nice things about working with Angel Eye is that because they have cameras in so many NICUs across the country, they already have relationships, and that can help expedite things. These are a separate thing. So Angel Eye really has a camera solution. Milk Tracker is a feeding solution, and then NICU to Home. So if you have any of those, they all integrate really nicely. But we recognize that not all NICUs are going to be putting cameras in. That just doesn't fit in their culture. So we've designed it in such a way that it's modular. So the video that you saw actually has the camera at the top of it. But that camera, if you don't have cameras, it slips out. If you have cameras and you're walking into the NICU, chances are you don't need to see your baby. You really want to see your baby at home. And so when you're in the NICU, that part slips out, and then the NICU to home module slips in. So it's really pretty seamless. And reaching out to Angel Eye would be the best way to get more information about, are you looking at trying to integrate cameras in NICU to home, or is it just NICU to home by itself, or is it all three of them? And I would just say, one of the things that made us think about it as researchers is like, okay, how do we go to the next stage? Is we needed to do it with an organization that really was committed to helping families, right? And that it wasn't just going to be like, well, let's start charging for this, or charging parents for it, or putting in advertisements or something. And so we really have been working closely with hospitals who see the value of this, who are like, the time is now, like particularly with COVID, and now flu season is coming upon us. That there are families who are not going to be able to get there, and how do we support them to stay engaged with their baby, I think is really important.
Yeah. And I think just one other technical, does it interlink with Cerna Power?
Yeah. Yep. And any of the EMRs are required to have this kind of like it's like, it's like a plug and play. And so the IT lift is actually not very heavy at all. And I would say if anyone who's kind of thinking about this, probably the best thing to do is is to, at the website, you can also at angelihealth.com, you can watch the little videos as well. So I would say, like, talk with the medical director and the nursing director at my unit. It's the nursing directors who really run things. So just show them what you're thinking about, and then let's have a conversation, and we can learn more about your NICU, and who you serve, and how we can best help you to kind of provide the best care for families.
Can you speak to how to navigate using this app if it's unit wide, if the baby is likely not going home? Because unfortunately we know that is the case, that for families, even,
Yeah.
more than you want it to be, but it's a realistic.
Yeah. No, that's a very important thing. And I would say we benefited in the research environment because we had parents consented, and we had a very close line of sight with them, with our research assistants in the field. So if we knew a baby was getting very sick, then we don't really want to be sending them information about, here's how to play with your baby if that baby's not doing well. So we're super sensitive to that, and we're working on kind of how we can identify that within the EMR so that information is tailored then in a different way for those particular families, because that is so sensitive. The other thing I would just add is I know many level threes work with level fours and things like that. If you are inside of a healthcare system and you both have the app, that service continues, which is really kind of nice, as we transfer. The other way that families or babies are leaving units is if they're transferred to another hospital for procedures and things like that. It can stay within the healthcare system, which is really kind of nice too.
That's amazing. That's
I
amazing.
want to thank both.
Yeah, I
This is
was gonna say all the other ones are, basically cost. I know that varies throughout hospitals, but Angel Eye is an exhibitor. So if you have any questions, I know there's a couple AI questions, things like that. They're in the exhibit. Pop your question in there, and they'll be happy to answer it.
Well, this is such a personal topic to me. After a long NICU stay, our discharge was rather bumpy, and being isolated at home and caring for a medically fragile child is so scary. And I'd known Cristal for a very long time, and Hand to Hold was engaged in those discharge planning guidelines, and just so proud to see all the work and advancement and how we're using technology today, and excited for the families to have this resource at their fingertips. And I really think it's going to be a game changer for parents being engaged with the care of the baby, understanding their different medical issues and challenges, being more comfortable in asking the right questions at the right time, and just going to improve that discharge process so much. So thank you both very, very much. I appreciate your time, Cristal. You are wonderful and a great speaker. And we wish Seth the best as he continues to recover from his surgery, and just think you're an amazing advocate and mother, and appreciate how you're using your story to help other families. So thank you both. Everyone, please join us back at 3:30. Dr. Sarah Wakefield, if you've never heard her speak, she's incredible. She has a great ending day session for us. So take that quick break, grab some more coffee. We'll see you at 3:30. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks.